Oh, hey everyone. We
Hi
are
there.
now we are now live. I'm going to bring Darren into the picture, literally. Hey, Darren.
Hi there.
Excellent. We were just going over the the run of show. So, yeah, got a little brief intro, little promo. Then I've got a longer glimpse, look, peek, however you want to say it, at the
Segment.
topic, segue, introduction, blah blah blah. Um, because I do want to compliment this guy for making the decision he did. I think it was a very smart decision. And
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
those who are listening live will just find out what we're talking about in a couple minutes. Uh, I like that. And then I took the questions that I kind of sent in that email the other day and just laid them out as talking points because I figure at that point, once I'm done blabbing at the beginning, at that point, I just kind of want to ask these questions and more or less get your input on it because I think you're going to have a much stronger viewpoint and opinions on it than I will. So
Cool.
I'll lead with an intro question, kind of hand it over to you, and then I've got four more kind of follow up questions to that.
Cool. Wow. Hopefully I can answer them.
Well, I think they're mostly what I put in the email. Uh,
Oh, fair enough. That's good.
the question is, um, do you have an essential app? Are you going to go with the one
Oh,
that you
I
have
I
been
do have I do
playing with?
have an essential app. Yes.
Okay. I thought you were. I have a backup just in case, but I thought you were going to go with that. So
Yeah,
I
yeah. I got something cool.
okay. Very cool. Very cool. All right. Great. What else? Do we just get going? Could we
Well, I suppose we
could we
could. Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
wow.
I know what I realized. I have not. We had a bit of feedback, didn't we? Let me see. Oh yeah. We have the feedback from Brian on the last episode,
Hmm.
and then we have the correction. We never mentioned the
Cool.
shortcuts library that we were talking about, so we have that correction.
Right. Yes.
And I also have a little addendum to episode 448. I don't even know if it's
Oh,
worth mentioning that anymore, but I'm going to mention it anyway.
why
Uh,
not? I can't remember that far back.
so let me add those to my notes here. Oops, why did that all come out in bold? I don't want that in bold. And then we've got the feedback from Brian.
Yeah, he had a suggestion, didn't he, of a particular site which was very good.
He did.
And in addition to the site that I suggested as well, so we got two for. Yeah, it's cool.
Yep. So I'm going to. Whoop, why is this all coming out in bold? I don't want this in bold. There we go. All right. And then this is the shortcuts library that you mentioned. And then my little addendum. I'll do my little addendum. Oops. What the heck did I just do? Undo. Okay. There we go.
Uh-oh.
Now I've got my notes.
Now you got it. Cool.
And with that, gosh, we might actually be able to get started. This would be a record for us.
Wow, this would be the absolutely record, yeah, because we usually start at like about 7:30 for the 7 o'clock show. Well, my
Yes,
time anyway.
a good 20, 30 minutes in, we start. And now we're going
Yeah.
to start.
No, we're only 4
Oh,
minutes in.
oh,
Uh-oh.
we are going to start late. You know why? Because
Uh-oh.
I have
Okay.
something to show you. I
Do
have
you? Oh,
something to
oh,
show you. This is super cool. Not very
this
many
is
people
exciting.
watching this are going to understand what this is, but I just received it. I just received it. All right, let me see if I can get this to you in a good way here. And then I'll tell you a
I'm
little bit about
intrigued.
this. Yes,
Cool.
yes, you should be, because this is amazingly cool. I want to pull up the URL for this just so I get it right. Um, Let me come over here and get it, because here it is. All right. I want to make sure I get the not only the name right, but where you can get it from correct.
Oh,
Okay, so I'm going to switch over to me real quick, Darren, because you're going to want to see this in widescreen. All right,
absolutely.
here we
I'm
go.
excited.
You should be. Ready? Are you
Yep.
ready? Okay, you know what this is?
Oh, that looks like a micro drive.
Oh, it does look like a microdrive, but
In
guess
fact, it's
what?
got micro drive written on it.
It's guess
Oh,
what? It's not a microdrive. Look at the front.
ah, the Spectrum thinks it's a micro drive, but it isn't. It's a SD card. No, it's not SD card. That's compact flash, isn't it, or something?
No, it's an SD card.
Oh, it is SD. Okay.
It's an
Wow, an
SD
SD
card
micro drive.
microdrive for the Spectrum.
Indeed, of course it is. Yes.
So this this is called. Now this is not fully assembled yet. I literally just got it right. So the
Absolutely. Oh, fabulous. Look at that.
yeah, this comes off and you can stick it on. This is the lovely rainbow cover for it.
Oh, of course,
So
and that
this
brings
is
back so much memory. So you got to have your rainbow slash on the old
yeah,
Spectrum. Excellent. Oh, look at that. Look at that. That's good.
look at
Of
that.
course, it fits in nicely with the gaming episode in a way because oh yes, ZX Microdrive. Um, yeah, so depending on the size of the memory card you get, possibly even the smallest memory card you get, you could probably fit every ZX Spectrum game that's ever been made on one card.
Pretty much. Pretty much. It will take a 32 gigabyte card.
That should do it.
That should do it. Now, now, here is the other thing I got. I got two things. Two
Wow,
things.
wow. Pushing the boat out
This,
there. Oh, that is a Sinclair QL. Is that a drive as well? Oh, same thing. Oh, I see. Oh, wow.
yeah.
Have you got
Now,
a QL?
unlike, I do have a QL. Um,
Wow.
I got it back in probably 85 or whenever they came out. I got it.
Oh,
Um,
wow, that's amazing. I only
so,
played with one in the shop for a while. I didn't actually ever own a QL, but
so this is a genuine injection molded case. Okay.
yes. Oh, the other one's, is that 3D printed? Because that
This is
looks
3D printed. This is a
pretty
3D
high
printed
quality. That
case.
it still looks very, very
It
good, very sharp.
They
Nice
did an
sharp
amazing
edges.
job on this.
Good job on that. Yeah, yeah.
It looks wonderful. So this is we have two devices here. Okay, the the ZX or ZX microdrive. This is
ZX.
tech
Yeah.
inside this is what's called the V Drive ZX or ZX. The V Drive ZX. This is an amazing, amazing device that comes from V Retro Design. V as in Victor, V Retro Design. And
Cool.
you can buy this completely assembled. And this is out of New Zealand, by the way. So
Oh, right.
this is what I
Nice.
was waiting for. I told you I had something super cool coming from New Zealand. This is it.
Yeah.
This is
That's
it.
that's
So
the genuine stuff. This is good. Yeah.
here is what makes this super unique. Again, this plugs into an interface 1 on your Spectrum. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't need any special hardware.
Yeah, for real, because it
Here's the
presents
cable.
itself like the real device, doesn't it? Yeah.
This is the real device. And
That
this
looks
plugs
like
into
the
your
original
interface
ribbon
1.
cable. Yeah.
The interface 1 is an external piece of hardware that plugged into the back of the Spectrum so
It
that
certainly was.
you could connect these puppies to it. And
Yeah.
these the original microdrives used what was called a streaming tape loop. It was
Yes, it did.
16 feet of tape wound about inside the cartridge. It did not have a start and an end like a cassette. It literally it looped the stream. The tape
Yeah, the whole
continued to
thing.
loop,
Yeah, yeah,
which is
yeah.
what gave it uh, uh, for the time fast access, right?
Yeah.
Because
Define
uh,
fast. Yeah.
unlike cassette, this could
Yes.
loop all the way through the tape, get back to the beginning, and keep reading. Right? You
Yeah.
didn't have to
Super quick.
rewind and
Yeah,
start.
yeah.
It could dynamically locate the contents you were looking for on the tape. Um, those cartridges are a little a little prone to
A little
wonkiness,
squirrely. Yeah, a little squirrely, I should
a little
imagine.
squirrely.
At least
Um,
nowadays.
One of the problems that you have with microdrive cartridges now here in the 21st century is
Yeah.
that the little felt piece that keeps the tape pressed against the read head of the microdrive tends to flake and fall
Degrade.
off,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, yeah.
so there's
So
all
that
kinds of.
can't maintain contact. I bet it's amazing to see one that's actually still working. But yeah,
Yeah, well, I do have.
a real one. I mean, yeah, yeah.
I've not dug it out, but I do have the real one too. And
Cool.
I've got my interface 1, so I need to dig those out of storage, connect them to my Spectrum next, and
Yeah.
start playing with this. Because I'm glad I bought it when I did, by the way, because the price went up about $10 in the
Wow.
last week.
Yes.
Um,
So not a huge
and
difference, but yeah. At least
starting
it's not a computer you're ordering.
starting next week, I believe, unless saner minds prevail, there would be an extra tax added onto it. Uh,
Would
it
that
looks like about,
be 10% for New
I think,
Zealand, or is it
10%
are
for New
they
Zealand.
hit a
Yeah.
bit harder for New Zealand? Okay.
So I didn't, I got it just in time, basically. But anyway, so
Good timing.
the magic of this is that you have the interface 1 connected to the Spectrum, and
Yeah.
then this goes between the interface 1 and your other microdrives. Now, if you recall, you could connect,
Oh, I see.
what was it? You could
Yes,
address,
you can daisy chain them. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you could always daisy chain microdrives, and I believe you could daisy
Yes.
chain like 8 of them together, if I recall.
That's
Uh,
craziness.
right? And each one had its own drive number. So, you'd have drive one,
Oh yes, of
two,
course.
three, four,
Oh,
and you would
it's all
address
coming back
them.
to me now. Comma one, comma two, comma three. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah. It's all coming
yep,
back
yep.
to me now.
Um, so here's the magic of this: you create virtual drives on the SD card,
Oh,
and you can
so it's
create up to 8 virtual drives.
so it's an 8-in-1. I see.
It's 8 in 1.
Yeah.
And
Oh, very
then
impressive.
once you've created the virtual drive, you create a virtual cartridge, and then you
Wow.
format that cartridge using the standard Spectrum format commands. Although the
Yeah.
ROM on here includes commands for like little shortcut commands to bypass the built-in Spectrum commands. But you can use the original Spectrum commands if you want.
Mm.
And then you format your virtual microdrive cartridge, and then you can start writing to it. Or you can back up or copy your old
Oh,
actual
wow.
microdrive cartridges to
To something a bit more permanent. Yes,
something a bit more
absolutely.
permanent, and it saves them in the MDR format, which is, as you probably
What's
know,
that?
a
I'm not sure what
standard
that.
for microdrive, um,
Oh, I didn't know. Oh, I didn't know that that
for
level. Yeah.
Spectrum
Okay.
emulators. You have the
Oh,
.z80
yes, I see.
or
Ah, but if you want
.z80
to, yeah,
files.
emulate the real thing, yeah. So, well,
You
well,
also have the
if you know what I mean. Yeah.
.mdr files and the .mdr
Right.
files, so you can create MDR files from your
Cool.
original microdrive
Im- im-
cartridges.
Imagine what it would have been like back in the day in 1980 or 6 or whatever it was, if we had such crazy technology with SD cards back then. We would absolutely have lost our minds.
Imagine, yeah, well, that's true. That's very true. But anyway, so I've got to dig my QL out. I've got to dig out my interface one, and then I can start playing with my V Drive ZX. And I'm beside myself with this. I've been wanting one of these for a
That's
number of
fantastic.
years. I've had the documentation for this printed out for probably about, oh gosh, maybe 6, 7 years. I've had the documentation printed out. I've just
Wow.
never come around to ordering one. And the
Wow.
the
It's
thing
like
that
all your birthdays have come at once.
it's $100, $100 for this, and that's the complete set. That's the V
Mm,
Drive ZX inside. It's the case, and it's
yes.
the cable. So it's a complete set for the 104. You can buy just the innards if you want, and then you can gut your own. If you have a microdrive, you can gut it and
Oh.
put these innards in it instead.
Oh, I see. Yes, you could do. Yeah, but yeah, you've
Yeah,
got to have the case though,
you got to have
and
the
you've got to have
case.
that rainbow sash. It's a
It,
must.
you kind of need it. Now there are you can download STL files to 3D print your own microdrive case if you want,
Oh,
but
nice.
I wanted the
No, it's good to have one that's
reproduction.
injected,
Yeah,
proper one.
it
Yeah, well, especially if you've been waiting that long. Absolutely.
it is a replica case. To the
Yes.
best of my knowledge, the I believe the person who came up with VDrive ZX uh, got access to the original molds or something because it has the Sinclair information on the bottom of it. So I don't know, but it does clearly state they're replica cases. So they're injection molded, so they're beautiful. They look like originals, but
Mm.
it's not.
It does look very authentic. Well, it looks like it's great. It's like
It's,
um,
it's
it's
amazing.
like it came from the factory from 30 years ago.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, $104 for the fully assembled version. The replica
Love it.
enclosure is $26. The V Drive ZX just by itself is $72. So if you have a case and you just want to create your own V Drive, you can do that. And then the little microdrive cables are $10. So considering I got the innards, the case, the cable, all that stuff for, well, I paid under $100 for it. Uh, good deal. Good deal. I was very
Yep,
happy with
good
that.
deal. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm excited to
Excellent,
try it.
excellent.
And I have a 32 gig SD card waiting for it right there. And then I got to get my Spectrum Next set up here on my desk. And part of the issue there was monitor, what I was going to use for a monitor for it, because we use
Oh yes, of course.
CRTs, right? And I do have, well, we use televisions is what we used. Um, but then later, I actually had a composite color monitor that I purchased for my, well, it was the
Yeah.
Timex Sinclair 2068, but that was, it was the US Spectrum. Um, and I had a composite color monitor I bought that to this day I believe still works. I used it for years and years as a monitor on a VCR. um, but I think it still works. But uh, the the
Ah,
the Spectrum Next has an HDMI connector on it. So I said, all right, I need to get a more modern monitor for it. And I have a really nice Dell I could connect to it, but it felt somewhat inauthentic because it's this 24-inch, high
it looks
resolution.
too good. Yeah.
It looks too good. So I actually found, squirreled away at the office on a shelf, I found a much, much older 4 by 3, not 16 by 9, but 4 by 3 Dell monitor with VGA and DVI on it. So I'm going to get an HDMI to DVI cable, and I think that's going to be my monitor for the Spectrum Next. So be a little bit more, with a 4 by
Cool.
3 aspect ratio, a little bit more authentic to what we had back in the day.
Or you could get something like an upscaler so that you could um, use the same monitor for your Mac as well as the Next and just switch back and forth.
Oh, well, the Next takes care of it. I mean, if I could hook it up to that 24-inch Dell display and it would work
Oh, okay, fair
beautifully.
enough.
Yeah. Yeah, the Next takes care of all that, which is wonderful. And the monitor on my Mac actually has multiple inputs on it, and I'm using the display port on it, so I could connect to the HDMI port on this display and just use the one monitor. But I want,
Sit.
I want a dedicated setup here.
uh,
So
you want
anyway,
those color bands and the wiggly lines.
that's right. That's right. I need the authenticity of it.
Indeed.
But so I thought you would be excited by that. I got my V Drive ZX. I didn't tell
Yeah,
you it was
I
coming,
am. Yeah,
or
that's fantastic.
as everybody else in the world calls it, the V Drive ZX. And I'm super excited to give it a try. I printed out
Fabulous.
all the documentation. I've got the QL version of it. I figured I'm ordering it. I might as well get the QL version too.
Of
And
course, why not?
uh, it showed up Thursday. Thursday, so I just
I
got
was
it.
amazed back in the day when I saw my first QL, and I thought, well, the high resolution graphics are amazing.
Yeah,
I was just bowled over by the fact that there was well 640 pixels, all those many pixels rather than
yeah,
274 or whatever the original Spectrum was. But
yeah.
yeah, it was amazing to see that many pixels on screen. It's like wow.
And the QL had two. It had a dual microdrive unit built into it.
Yes, it did indeed. And
So
two built in. Yeah,
two built in.
lovely
So
design. Yeah.
yeah. And then there was no, you didn't need the interface one for the QL because it was all built into it. So
No, because well,
this
it was there.
external
Yeah, yeah.
microdrive will connect just directly to the QL, and then I'll have a, third one. But super, super clever design. And yeah, I'm excited to try it. And I did watch some YouTube videos of others using it. And this one guy had an SD card. So you create these banks. You can create banks of
Yeah, yeah,
like virtual banks of drives. So within
yeah.
any given bank of drives, you can have 8 virtual drives. And then those virtual drives, you have your individual cartridges and the whole thing. Well, he had an SD card just filled with banks of, um, and they were all
Yeah.
numbered like ZX 001, 002, 003. So you know that they were just filled with collections of
Yeah, I saw one
software.
years ago actually, or something very similar to it anyway, where someone was switching banks and loading stuff from multiple banks on the spectrum. It was at a demo party, and this guy was one of the probably I'd say one of the world's best spectrum coders, machine code programmers.
Mm,
He
hmm.
was he did sort of one of his specialties was showing off things that he'd written as sort of like routines that were supposed to be impossible for that hardware to accomplish. So he would do impossible ports and codes like that, and the stuff he showed me was amazing. It's like that cannot be possibly be running on a Spectrum, and there was a real Spectrum there with a code bank switching memory card system.
Oh,
So yeah,
oh,
very
you're
yeah.
talking about
He had the
memory
lot.
code bank switching. Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah,
talking about virtual banks of cartridges or virtual banks of drives, micro drives.
yeah. Drives. Yeah,
So a
yeah.
little bit different, but similar concept, but still super brilliant. The bank, yes, the bank switching, memory bank switching stuff for Spectrums was amazing. And
Yeah, so
just,
that's what he used as a coder. So it was funny because this the demo coding show I used to go to every now and then, they covered all the platforms. So they had these special sections for um, very low code stuff. So they had a special 4K section. So what you had to program must only fit in 4K or 1K, say for instance.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the sort of things that they could produce in like 1K was quite astonishing.
Now, if I recall, so the ZX80 was 1K, but wasn't the initial ZX81 1K as well? I know you could get the
Yes, I think
16K.
the minimum was 1K for the ZX80 and the 81. Yeah.
Yeah, because our Timex Sinclair 1000, which was the US ZX81, was 2K.
Mm.
So
Well, I remember you couldn't run 3D Monster Maze unless you put that 16K RAM pack on the back.
and then like hold it just in the
Yeah,
right spot so it
make
didn't
sure it doesn't wobble so it doesn't
jiggle its
crash.
connections loose. Yeah. The common technique was to get a rubber band and put it around the front of
Oh,
the
absolutely.
computer
Yes, it
and
was
around
essential.
the yep,
Yeah, you had to have your rubber band
because
to
if
keep the
it
memory
jiggled
in.
just enough.
Yeah. And of course, if you're playing Monster Maze and you're running away from the monster, it's very easy to jiggle that memory pack.
Monster Maze was an amazing application considering
At the time, it was astonishing. Yeah.
what the hardware or what hardware it had to work with. Amazing, amazing stuff.
Effectively no hardware.
Effectively, no hardware. Exactly. All right. So
Yeah.
now we're officially 27 minutes in. See, now we're more on track.
Oh, perfect.
Now
Now we're
we're,
the correct timing. Yeah, that's it.
yeah, okay. So, oh, the nice thing too. So again, V Retro, V Retro Design. One of the nice things, and by the way, I should probably mention the guy's name, Charlie Ingley, Ingley, Charlie Ingley, V Retro
Excellent.
Design. If you know, look, I know this is a Mac show, but if you, like me and Darren, have a Spectrum and
Well, yeah.
you have an Interface One, or you've been itching to get an Interface One, and you want to use SD cards in it for some reliability, vretrodesign.com. That's where you want to go for that. Oh, but anyway, so when he packed it, you know, yes, the QL V drive was in bubble wrap, and the V drive ZX was in a Ziploc bag, but the packaging in the box was shredded paper, which I really appreciated.
Oh,
Except for the
yes.
fact that when I opened it, shredded paper got all over the
It went
place.
everywhere.
And I just had some on
But
my Mac I
at
had to
least it's
blow
better
off.
than those horrible polystyrene balls. So that's good. Yeah,
Yeah,
shredded paper,
yeah,
much
yeah.
better
The,
idea.
the cornstarch ones are tasty, but the other ones are not.
Oh yeah, cornstarch. Yeah, you could always put it in the microwave and put some butter on it later.
Have you eaten a cornstarch packing peanut?
No, I bet it's not entirely
They're
pleasant.
they're not bad. They're not bad. You
Okay.
can, yeah. I didn't put butter on. I just, yeah, just popped one into my mouth, but they're not bad.
Fair enough.
They're not bad. All right, let's get going. Let's get going.
Cool, cool, cool.
So again, I got a little intro to it, a little promo, a little bit more in-depth intro to the topic, and then we'll go back and forth on the questions.
Great.
Sound good?
Excellent.
All right.
Mm.
Excellent. Here we go. See what I think of this title. All right. In 3, 2, 1. It's for Mac Guys Only, episode number 450 for April 26th, 2025. A toast to Whisky. No, I screwed that up. A toast to whiskey. There you go. Hey everyone, welcome back to For Mac Guys Only, the show for the Mac community, where we share our thoughts and opinions on current Mac news and events. And joining me to discuss all things Mac is Darren Davies. Howdy, Darren. How you doing?
Howdy there.
And remember, if you're joining us live, I'm going to be keeping an eye on that chat room too. So if you have any questions or comments as we move along, be sure to drop them in the chat room, and we'll try to address it here on the show. Well, each week we look at emails that listeners have sent us, as well as the top news stories since the last episode, as well as digging into the depths of our own brains to come up with a topic for any given episode. Which is always a dangerous task. And then there are the news stories that piqued my interest. Man, why do I keep screwing this up? I'm gonna, okay, 3, 2, 1, cut.
Fix it in post.
Fix it in post. I'm very stumbly today. I'm stumbling over my words. I know what in my brain I want to say, but it's not coming out. I think I need another cup of coffee. Here we go.
That's it. Well, all the best actors have this trouble.
Okay. I am now fully caffeinated, so I can keep going. I know what I wanted to say. All right. Here we go. And then there was the news story that piqued my interest because it's about something that we've discussed quite a lot on the show, especially since you've joined us, Darren. And that's running apps and games from the Windows platform on our Macs. Now, whether it's virtualization, emulation, or a compatibility layer like Wine, getting Windows apps running and running well can be tricky. But when you look at running games, especially modern games on the Mac, well, maybe the word tricky doesn't do it justice. And while this is a bit of a throwback to a topic that we've covered not too terribly long ago, there was a bit of news this week that brought this topic back to the forefront, and that's the discontinuation of the Whisky project. Before we get to that, though, MacStock 9 is coming up quickly, and it is absolutely one of the best weekends of the year if you are into Macs, if you're into iPhones, if you're into iPads, pretty much all things Apple. It is 3 days of awesome talks, super useful workshops, and a chance to hang out with some of the nicest Apple fanatics on the planet while taking in some amazing talks from the likes of Brittany Smith, Kelly Guimont, Doc Rock, Dave Ginsburg, Allison Sheridan, Brett Terpstra, Jeff Gamet, among others, all of whom you can check out at the MacStock website. And while you're there, be sure to check out this year's schedule for some fantastic sessions that cover anything and everything Apple, like getting the most from photos, Apple's new AI features, creating shortcuts, and even security-focused talks like staying safe online and using those new passkeys that we've all been hearing about. So, whether you are a longtime Mac geek or you are just getting into the ecosystem, you're going to walk away with new ideas, you're going to walk away with new skills, and you're probably going to walk away with a few new friends too. Grab your 3-day pass now at macstockconferenceandexpo.com and come hang out with us this summer, July 11th, 12th, and 13th, because it's going to be a really awesome weekend. And by the way, if you've been meaning to go to MacStock but keep putting it off, I have got a little extra special incentive for you. you can use the code MacStock50 off, and you're going to save $50 on your weekend pass. Don't miss out on the best weekend of the summer, and come join us at MacStock. Okay, Darren, let's get back to whiskey and what happened. First, and chime in, by the way, if you have anything to add or
Oh,
if I
yeah.
get anything
Okay.
wrong
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
But the first question is, what is whiskey? You have been hearing about it in the news the past week. It has been on all the blogs because a pretty major project, especially for gaming on the Mac, Windows gaming on the Mac, has been discontinued. So, Whisky is a front end for the Wine project. And Wine is an open source project that provides a compatibility layer for running Windows applications and games on other platforms like Linux and Mac OS. And
Yeah.
because it's not an emulator or because it's not virtualization, it can actually
Wine is not
provide
an
this.
emulator.
Wine is not an emulator. They used to call it that. They used to go by the acronym Wine is not an emulator, but they don't anymore. It's no longer all
Oh.
caps. I looked that up before we recorded.
Uh,
I think it's like IBM. It's no longer International Business Machines. It's just
oh.
IBM.
Those
Well, this
business
is
machines are not international anymore.
it's just wine. Well, anyway, because it's not an emulator and because it's not virtualization, it can actually provide this translation of those Windows API calls on the fly with very little or actually almost no performance hits. Now, what Whisky
Yeah, pretty
provided,
much.
what Whisky provided was a pretty front end to the complexity of setting up what they call a wine bottle. And bottles are effectively bundles of components that make up a Windows file system. And what Whisky did quite well, actually,
Mm.
in particular, was to make it easy to set up and run games on your Mac. But you could, I suppose, if you wanted to use it for non-games as well. I think you could. I
Yeah.
don't think there was any
Yeah. Yeah.
limitation on it. Now, if that sounds familiar, it probably should, because there is another project that does something very, very similar, and that project is called Crossover from Codeweavers. And while there are some pretty big differences between what Whisky provides you and what Crossover provides you, I want to hold off on talking about that for just a moment because the news is that the developer of Whisky, an 18-year-old college student, by the way,
Yeah.
named
It's amazing.
Isaac Marovitz, said that he is ending the project. And I wanted to talk about that because to me, that's really the news. And it's not
Mm.
news because a developer got tired and walked away from a project. It's news because of the integrity that this young man showed in how he suspended the project. Not only was he
Ah.
open, yeah, right? Not only was he open about his reasoning, literally, he wrote, I lost interest in the project. But he also admitted that, you know what? He's not being paid for this. And by the way, it's incredibly time consuming and it's
Absolutely.
hard.
Yeah. It's like a job.
It's literally a job. And on top of that,
Yes.
Whisky being a project that depended very heavily on the open source code of Wine, Isaac also admitted that he is simply not able to contribute back to the Wine project like he should be doing. But he says Code Weavers does contribute to the Wine project. They contribute quite
Yes.
heavily, in fact, not only in terms of improving the code base, but as Isaac points out, a very sizable amount of the revenue that the Wine project generates each year comes from Code Weavers. He also mentions Valve and their Proton project, as well as all the dedicated developers whose knowledge of Mac OS alone allows them to make the contributions that are needed to keep the Wine project alive on the Mac. And then
Yeah.
finally,
Yeah.
Isaac closes with admitting that because he's not actively contributing back to the Wine project, he feels that and this is in his words, this parasitic relationship means that whiskey
Wow.
is actively harming wine on Mac OS.
Oh.
So that's his thoughts on it. Oh, and oh yeah, he says, if you want to keep playing your Windows games on the Mac, you should probably buy Crossover. Now,
Mm.
um, this was all released in a maintenance note or a maintenance notice, I guess it was called, on the Whiskey Project's page. And as I read his maintenance notice that was announcing the end of the project, I had to keep reminding myself that he's only 18. I can't
Yeah.
imagine that this was an easy decision for Isaac to make, and yet he made this decision
No.
with grace, he made it with dignity,
Yeah.
he made it with maturity, and a rare commodity in today's world, he made it with honesty. Now, with the
Yeah. That's
news of,
impressive. Yeah.
yeah, with the news of Whiskey's, let me say that again. Now, with the news of Whiskey's demise out of the way, um, I wanted to talk to you about this, Darren, because I know you have a special
Yeah.
interest in the news, and that's because you're a whiskey user. In fact, you are the one who introduced me to whiskey. So I wanted to start with a much, much simpler question, and then we can get on to some of the more complex questions. But the simple question is, who needs crossover or wine or emulation or virtualization or whiskey or whatever? Who needs this? Why is this an important project to have disappeared from our Max drives?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the main things that's very interesting. I mean, he's an extremely good developer in his own right. Um, the guy who's made whiskey,
Yeah.
um, and it is all of the components are open source. So it is a developer is able to grab those components and build them up themselves in a similar way that Crossover is done, although Crossover is commercial. But one of the good things about Crossover, as you say, they're actively um, uh, giving code back that they've improved back to the wine project, and it's all circular and so on, which is really good. Um, and it's commercial, of course, but they can offer full support as well to
Mm-hmm.
users. So as users get into a pickle, perhaps trying to get a game to run that should sort of possibly run, but isn't listed as being supported, you can send them reasons why it fails, for instance, and then they can work on improving the whole project to include support for that game that doesn't work. And slowly and slowly, everything gets better. And now there are thousands of games that are supported. But the guy who developed Whiskey's done a fantastic job. In fact, so good, he's generated himself a worldwide reputation. So, I mean, how many 18-year-olds can say, I have a worldwide reputation in this particular field? So,
Right.
I think he's on a future course to stardom because literally, as a coder, he could, pretty much write his own check for whichever future career he goes into. He's that highly regarded. So he's going to do great out of that. But yeah, I think you're right. It's the way it's been handled with grace and integrity. We need to see more of that side of things in the developer communities. So it's all it's not a disaster, but it's a shame in a way because whiskey was one of the ways to introduce potential switchers, and I do see quite a lot of this. Whilst, say, for instance, perusing Reddit, as I sometimes do, um, I see Windows users, especially coming up to the point of they now must choose. As Windows 10 goes end of life, they now must choose their future direction for their machine that it may or may not be supported, or often not supported. And which road do they go down? A lot of them are thinking of switching platforms entirely, which for someone who is mainly focused on gaming is quite a brave choice for them to do because
Indeed.
it's an unknown thing. I mean, they're very much used to Windows. Um, so choosing to switch platforms entirely uh, is a completely unknown situation for them. And Whisky was one of those really useful ways whereby they could try it out for free without dipping their toe into the waters or diving head first straight into an unknown world. They could dip their toe in and say borrow a Mac and try Whisky without spending any money on subscriptions, just to see if what they were planning to do would work. And it was really useful for that, just to introduce very new users to the platform. So it's a shame that Whisky has disappeared, but Crossover does give you a nice long trial period, so all is not lost for getting new users to the platform to give things a go. Um, so just yeah, it's just giving them information about what they can expect on different platforms, what sort of performance they can expect, um, and of course there are a lot of users out there, Windows diehard users that come back to anyone thinking of switching over and saying, "Oh no, don't do that. Macs are terrible for gaming. You won't get anywhere," and trying to put people off and not giving them any actual practical advice. Here's what you can expect, and you can nicely, comfortably game on a Mac, especially with native ports. Although there's not so many of those nowadays, but that's improving. But yeah, it's all down to the developers. They create AAA games for Windows only, and if you can't, as you say, it's not really virtualization or emulation. It's more like translation layers. If you can't run their code through a translation layer, you can get a bit stuck. But Whisky and Crossover are the things that make the whole situation easy to dive into and do if you're playing alien platform games. And that's not just games with aliens in them, that's just games that shouldn't run on the Mac. So it just makes it easy.
So, just going back for a moment there, Whiskey certainly makes it easy for someone who is a gamer on Windows to consider the
Mm,
Mac as a platform for gamers. Um,
exactly.
Apple is attempting to change things and help developers create more native ports. That's true.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know how well their efforts are working. I have not seen a
It's going
huge influx
not
of
too bad.
games, but it's working well enough. Um, but there is a big difference between Whiskey and Crossover, and I guess we'll talk about this in a little bit for someone who is considering moving to a different platform from Windows, in that Crossover also provides the tools needed to do this on a Linux box as well. So there is a version of Crossover for Linux. There's a version of Crossover for Mac OS, um, and and again, we'll get to this a little bit more later. But Crossover also provides much greater compatibility with a select number of games than Whiskey ever did. Whiskey didn't even get to the direct. Wait, they didn't get to Wine. They didn't get to Wine 8 yet. That hadn't been implemented in Whiskey yet.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Usually a little bit
crossover
behind. Yeah.
crossover is currently on Wine 9, and I believe the current version is 10. So there's always going to be a little bit, developers of, well, the developer of Whiskey, the developer of Crossover, they're always going to be just slightly behind the primary project. And that is the case here. But Crossover does provide some additional support for things like the Epic Games and Ubisoft launchers, which is something that Whiskey didn't provide.
Yes.
And as you pointed out, they provide support and regular updates. Now, one of the confusing things about Crossover is that people think it's a subscription, and it's not a subscription. It is a perpetual license when you buy it. There is no you there is no requirement that you continue paying year after year after year if the version that you have does what you need it to do. there will come a time where it no longer works properly with Mac OS. As Apple continues to release new versions and things like that, there will be things that break, and you might consider upgrading at that point. But you don't
Yeah.
have to. It's a one-time purchase. And the other thing is that and I do have a crossover license, so I'm kind of speaking from experience here. And I believe you
Cool.
do too, don't you?
Well, no, I don't, but that's not too much of a problem. Yeah, like I say, they've got a good demo you can try things with for, is it a month's demo or something like that?
Oh, it's a decent amount. I don't even know how long their demo period is because I've had a crossover license for at least 15 years. I've had it for forever.
Yeah.
Um, but the renewals or the upgrades, if you will, which is what they are. I shouldn't say renewal because that implies subscription, and it's not a subscription. Gosh darn it! But the upgrades are very, very inexpensive. I think the last time I
Yeah, they're
paid for an
reasonable, aren't they?
upgrade,
Yeah.
I think I paid something along the lines of $35 for 2 years. And what that
Well,
means is
well,
you
that's
get
that's fine, isn't it? Yeah.
you get the upgrades and patches. When you purchase a perpetual license, you get those upgrades and patches up until the next year. And then at that point, you don't get any more, but your software doesn't stop working. It's not like Microsoft
No,
Office that
no.
will, break itself if you don't keep your subscription going. Instead, crossover will keep working exactly as it worked for you, provided you don't need any upgrades. You're fine. It's a one-time purchase.
Yeah, that's it.
Plus, they're always running specials. I think I renewed mine on a Black Friday special, and that's how I got it so cheap. So, if you're
Yeah,
interested in it, watch for those kind of specials. Get on their mailing list and look for sales because they do run them all the time. Um,
yeah.
but you mentioned gaming. Who else needs this though, Darren? Why would I want
Well,
crossover? Why would I want uh, something like Parallels? Why would I want Wine? Or why do I need this on my Mac? I've got all the software I want to run. Why do I need this?
well, that's it. I mean, you really only need something like, well, in fact, you could do it without crossover, but doing it manually yourself, as you touched on earlier,
It's not
doing the
easy.
installation yourself, you really have to
Of
know
Wine,
your
you mean?
onions to
Of
get a.
Wine.
Oh yes, of
Yeah,
wine, yeah,
yeah,
doing everything that, even just preparing the bottles, but before then, like putting everything in place, all the necessary drivers and all the necessary um, hooks to to trick the Windows software into thinking it's running on a Windows machine when it isn't. There's all sorts of stuff
right.
in there, and the manual instructions for setting this up. Well, yeah, you could probably do a PhD in astrophysics. It would probably be easier to start with, and then you can move on to doing this.
Move on to
So yeah, it's making it convenient, so you can just install crossover, and it makes all the hard work convenient for you. So yeah, there is a
yeah,
bit of money involved in doing that, but it's well worth its weight in gold, or else you could be sitting there for many hours trying to get all of this to work, because it
yeah.
is very complex what's going on behind the scenes. But as you say, you really only need it if you specifically want to play Windows only games. Um,
But there's
if
another
you're
reason you
doing
might
any,
need it too,
okay,
right?
is
And
there?
and that is if you want to run a Windows specific application, even a
Oh
productivity
well,
application that
you could,
can't be found
yeah,
on the
you could
Mac.
think about that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be another
But there
reason you
there
might
are
need it.
true, but there are other ways of doing non-game Windows apps that you may want to explore as well. So you wouldn't necessarily need crossover for, but then, as you say correctly, that crossover does cover you for both.
Hmm.
So but there are other ways and means of running non-gaming Windows software that you may want to explore as well. So there's all sorts of that's a slightly the tricky side actually, because when someone asks you for recommendations, it's like, well, we can achieve this in 15 different ways. Which way should we go? Which avenue should we go down and explore? So it can be a bit tricky to find out what the best way for each person to achieve what they want to achieve is. It's not necessarily this one product is correct for every single person, but there are almost too many ways of doing some of this virtualization and so on,
Yeah,
with varying degrees of success. Yeah.
if so, here's the neat thing about Wine and Crossover is that they provide a database of known applications,
Yes.
applications that people have tried and have had varying degrees of success with. And the varying degrees of success boils down to what how complex are the needs of that application that you're attempting to run. One of the
Yeah.
much more complex applications that I don't know if anyone has ever gotten to run successfully under Wine is Microsoft Access. Microsoft
Oh
Access
no, not
has
Access. That's the bane
a,
of my life.
a
Access. Oh.
lot of problems running under Wine. So if
Oh God.
so this ties into what you were saying, Darren, is trying to analyze what is it that you want to do that can't be done
Yeah.
natively on the Mac. If what you want
Exactly.
to
What do you
do
want to
is
achieve?
run Microsoft Access, then what you have to do is you have to run that under virtualization or emulation, depending on the version of Access that you're trying to run and
That's it.
the
Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
windows that you need and all that kind of stuff. Just keep in mind that if you're emulating or virtualizing a Windows environment, you need a Windows license to do that. If
That's
the
right. Yeah.
application that you want to run doesn't require all that, if it has a what do they call it? A gold rating? Is that what it is on Wine? It's a
Yeah. Was it platinum? Something like that.
platinum. They
I
have
think the top one is platinum. Yeah.
different levels of ratings, and if it's the top tier rating, that means that
Then
darn
it's
near
perfect. Yeah.
100% of the people who are trying to get it working got it working and it's working well.
Yes.
If
Yes.
it's rated highly, the application that you want to run, then it's definitely worth giving Wine or Crossover or one of the other interfaces for the Wine environment a go and see
Yeah.
if you can get that application running. The older the application, probably the greater the chance it's going to work, with notable exceptions like Access. But otherwise, if you really need that full Windows environment, you're going to have to go virtualization or emulation. So that's
Yeah.
really probably the main reason someone might need or want crossover slash Wine or something like Parallels or something like VMware or you know uh, uh, UTM. If you're going to attempt to run Windows applications or games on your Mac, um, as you very rightly said, Darren, boiling it down to what it is you want to run, how many different applications you want to run, do you want to do gaming? That's going to help point you in the right direction uh,
Yeah.
for a either single solution or multiple solutions to do what it is you need to do.
Yeah. I mean, you've also got to, as Mac users, I suppose, or even potential Mac users, you've got to ask yourself, do I really need access to everything?
Right?
Because when you look at the crossover list you mentioned, um, there's literally, well, I think there's nearly 2,000 odd. There's
There's a
a
lot.
thousand odd. There's thousands of games. It's like, well, you probably uh, you won't be able to play them all. It's not enough time, hours in the day to play some of these things. So you might not necessarily need access to the whole library of everything on every platform. That's just a bit OTT perhaps. So you might look, say, especially if you're a bit more of a casual gamer or an indie gamer, you might look and see what's available for the Mac natively, and also under emulation. There's all sorts of things you can do under emulation. You might look at that and say, oh, that's enough for me. There's hundreds of games out there. So why do I need access to the full Windows library of games as well? So there's not enough hours in the day to do all this gaming. I've got to go out and earn a crust. So it's, you got to look at the of what you're intending to do, and why you need to do it. I think sometimes people are a bit um, um, they intend to play everything, and when they find out oh, actually, I haven't got time to do what I was intending, they needn't have gone down that road in the first place.
Yeah, and when we're talking about gaming, I think it was right of the developer of Whisky to call out Valve and
Yeah.
Proton, because when you look at Steam, the number of games that are now available for the Mac, thanks to Proton and their efforts to get them running on Linux, uh, a great number of
Yeah.
games are also now simultaneously available for Mac OS. So Valve is doing a lot of really great work in helping to bring games that wouldn't otherwise be possible or will never be ported to the Mac over to our
Mm.
platform. So you got to give them props for that. And
Yeah.
you know,
It's a shame they haven't actually made Proton fully available in the Mac version of Steam yet, because that would open
oh, that'd be
a lot
huge.
of doors which are currently closed. That would be huge. Yeah. So currently it's easier to play Windows games without um, uh, jumping through too many hoops if you go down the Linux route, purely because Proton is built into Steam on Linux, whereas it isn't on the Mac. And if they could get around to some parity there, then that would improve the lives of Mac users that are wanting to play Windows games dramatically, because that could make things a lot easier. Although Crossover may not be very pleased about that, because that would negate some of the need for crossover. So they might think, oh, that's a bad idea.
Maybe, but I was just about to mention as well that Valve has a definite or they have a definite interest in making sure that this works well on Linux because of the Steam Deck, which is a
Oh yes,
Linux-based
absolutely. They've got the platform
handheld
on it. Yeah, yeah.
platform that they pretty much had to develop Proton for to get these games running well on it. So
Mm.
a lot of great work being done by Valve for not only the Steam Deck but the Steam in general, and helping to get some of those some of the work that they're doing folded back into the Wine project so that companies like Codeweavers can take advantage of it and bring it into crossover. And it's it,
That's it. Yeah, it's very
as
circular. They're all sort of working along the same lines,
it's very circular, and that's
which
where
is good.
um, Isaac's approach to closing down the Whiskey project was beautiful, because
Yeah.
he made a point of saying, look, I'm not doing this. I am not contributing to these projects like these people are.
Mm.
And again, the word parasitic was his wording. He
Yeah, I
called
think that's a bit
Whiskey,
too strong, though, what he said about
well,
himself there.
it I don't I don't I think
I
it's
can see
right.
where he's
I
coming
think it's
from, but
right
yeah.
in the way that he used it, in that he was trying to describe accurately the relationship of Whiskey to the Wine project, and Whiskey to
Yes.
crossover, and Whiskey to some of these other projects. And when you look at how much time and effort and development hours are being put into and
Mm.
contributed back to these projects by Valve and Codeweavers and what have you, and then look at what he was contributing back, he's like, yeah, I'm not doing
Yeah.
a darn thing. So if you're interested in doing this sort of thing on the Mac, go out and buy Crossover, because your money is going to be
Yeah,
well spent.
that's it. That's one of the things I was going to mention. That if you are new to the Mac platform, you're a Windows gamer, you're quite an avid Windows gamer perhaps, and uh, just basically you should factor in the cost of crossover into your Mac purchase, and just say, this is what I need to have. Um, for other people, much less so, depending on what they want to achieve. But for if you're an avid Windows gamer and you're thinking about switching to the Mac, which I would say would be a very good idea, especially with what's happening now, and you're possibly faced with the idea of um, dramatic upgrades to your PC, if not completely getting rid of it and buying a new one. That uh, the scary side of learning something new, uh, like moving from Windows 11 to, or well, no, Windows 10 to Mac OS, um, there's not much in it, because it's probably similar to what you'd have to learn by buying a new system anyway.
Yeah.
depending on how much of a gamer you are, because some gamers they'll live inside the games and not worry about what's running underneath. But um,
Whiskey gained quite a lot of notoriety in the community, especially amongst those
yes.
who played Windows games on the Mac. Uh, so, what does this mean for those who used Whiskey?
Um, I think I think well, they can still carry on using, as you say, what they've already installed, and if what they're currently playing that is supported is still what they're aiming to carry on playing, then they can just carry on as they
Keep going.
yeah, keep going, yeah. Um, but it's just the new stuff that comes down the line that may or may not be in that golden compatibility list that then won't be supported going forward or improved upon later on. So um, at that point, you might think, yeah, it's a good idea. I'll migrate over to crossover. It's a very very similar setup and system anyway. And yeah. Um, but
I
yeah,
would
it
be
depends what you want to
surprised.
run, really.
I would be surprised if it's not a fairly easy port to bring your wine
Oh
bottles
yes,
from Whiskey
yeah.
over
You
to
could
crossover.
probably grab your whiskey bottles over and put them into into crossover bottles. Yeah,
They
you
may
could probably
even
import them.
work
There may
better.
even be an importer actually.
Um, some of the things that Isaac mentions in his, and I did even outrightly say this a few moments ago, but in his maintenance notice, he says, we will not be upgrading to Wine 8. And so you are never, well, he doesn't say never, I'm going to say never, you are never going to find fixes for specific apps and games.
Yeah, that have been fixed in 9. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's just not going to happen. So that is one bit of news to keep in the back of your head if you're a Whiskey user. As you
yeah,
said, Darren, if everything's working, you're probably fine. At
yeah.
least for now, at
And
least for the interim.
there are a couple of uh, big items that are being rewritten as we speak or probably already has been written, to make them entirely Mac native. So you won't need any extension to run them on, since they'll run natively on the Mac. So that one is particularly, say for instance, you're currently playing the big one, Cyberpunk 2077. If you're playing that on through crossover or Whiskey now, um, no need to panic. There is a version of that being written natively for the Mac, which is coming down the road. So you
Okay.
won't need any translation layers for that particular game. So if you're a big um, gamer on that particular platform or that particular game, then a Mac native version is coming real soon now.
Interesting.
And
Interesting.
that's going to be very interesting, because we could then directly compare the speed that you can game within crossover playing the Windows version of Cyberpunk directly to the Mac native version of Cyberpunk, and see the difference it makes when a Windows game is fully rewritten to be Mac native. It'll be very, very interesting to compare the two. And I'm predicting, or should I predict? Should I predict? Yeah, go on then. Let's
Go
predict.
on. Go on.
I'll predict that. Yeah, why not? Prediction. I think that the Mac native version of Cyberpunk will run twice as fast as the one that runs under crossover. So I'm predicting double frame rates on that one.
Okay, that's a pretty softball prediction there, Darren.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
What about comparing the Mac version to the Windows version, running natively on a Windows box? What's your prediction there?
Well, now, oh wow, no, that's a bit more difficult, because there's a lot of variation in the underlying hardware, the graphics drivers, and all the other things. I do have a list which you might find interesting, and the listeners might find interesting if we bung said list in the show notes. I have a benchmarking tool that I use this isn't going to be my my essential app. Actually, it's something else. Um, but I use this tool to measure gaming performance or potential gaming performance as an indicator, at least, between PC, Linux, and Mac, so we can
Mm.
directly compare the three. And a tool I use by Unigene, who do some benchmarking tools. They do a benchmark called Valley, Unigene Valley. So it's just a graphic benchmark that pushes your machine. And what I've done is I've been gathering over the last few months, probably nearly a year of gathering data. I've gathered quite a lot of results from running this particular benchmark with the same settings across a very large number of machines. So that includes several different types of PCs with different graphics hardware in them, and different Macs. And it's very interesting to see, for instance, the performance on an Intel Mac with a discrete graphics card, which back in the day, when I had one, cost me a fair bit extra. I had to pay extra for the enhanced graphics card on my Intel Mac. And then comparing that directly to the next Mac I got, which was an Apple Silicon Mac, but without the discrete graphics card, using Apple's own GPU cores.
Right.
And it's very interesting to see the benchmark number differences between the two. Like
Hmm.
the fact that one has to translate a lot more than the other did, and yet the speed was the same, if not slightly
If not
better.
better.
So, oh yeah, slightly better. It wasn't massively better, but it was slightly better. And I've recently set up a base model 24-inch M4 iMac for someone, and I benchmarked to that one as well, so we could get some results. And that's quite. I got some quite impressive results from that one as well. And I also, what I'll do is I'll paste in a YouTube video that only came out an hour before we started talking. So that's quite recent. And what he's done is he's tested various real world games. So this isn't benchmarking, this is some real world games, including some Windows games, so non-native games, playing on an M4 MacBook Air. So one of the things about that, oh, that's the other thing I was going to mention, which would be very handy for people who would think about switching to the Mac as a platform that they want to game on, is that if you did go down the route of a laptop, and especially thinking of the Air, that one it has a good ability to game.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the downsides is it has no cooling. There's no
No
fan on
fans.
there. Well, no active cooling. Yes, so that really does affect gaming. So if the machine can't cool itself down, because it does get quite hot doing all of these. I mean, a game is one of the most complex things you can run on a computer at all. So that's the thing that's going to push your machine to the limit. It often makes your machine go quite warm, shall we say. Don't want to burn your lap. Um, so the downside is that the MacBook Air in particular can't cool itself to maintain the frame rate. So what it has to do is it has to throttle itself down, and then your frame rate can drop quite dramatically. It's not as serious as you would think, because when you look at the results that he's getting, then they're not too bad. So if you're not an avid serious multiplayer gamer, then you might look at the results and think, oh, that's fine. That's a frame rate I can live with. I can play with that. That's fine. No worries. But if you were planning on doing a lot of this type of crossover gaming, and you're planning on moving to the Mac, then I would buy one with active cooling at least. So that would be Mac Mini, because that's got nice active cooling on it.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a nice base system to play with. And then going up into the GPU layers. So for instance, if you wanted a laptop, you should get a laptop, a MacBook Pro, if you were thinking of because that's got some nice active dual fan cooling on there, and it should maintain those frame rates. So that was it. Just mentioning the frame rate situation. So I've got a nice list of results from this benchmark, and I've got a YouTube video showing exactly what you should expect on the lower end of the Mac lineup. So if what you're seeing there looks promising, then that's the lowest you can get. So everything else you buy will be better than that. So it's a good indicator to see what you can expect to get results wise from playing crossover games, for instance, on the Mac. So yeah, that's a good YouTube video to look at.
And I want to go into the next question, but for our live stream watchers right now, I'm going to add on a little note to what you were just saying, because the software that we're using right now, Ecamm Live, for doing our live stream, is very similar in terms of the types of hardware that you should use. And I embarrassed myself a bit because I was actually on a live stream with people from Ecamm, and someone watching the live stream was asking about hardware requirements. And they asked about the MacBook Air. And my initial reaction was, yeah, it should be fine. You should be able to use the MacBook Air. Boy, I got shut down so fast. In the nicest, kindest way. They're like,
Yeah,
no, no, do not use the MacBook Air. Now, I will qualify that by saying I have used a MacBook Air with Ecamm Live, and it works fine as long as you don't push it too hard.
exactly. It depends what you expect to have. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned it. But their reasoning is the exact same reasoning that you mentioned, and that is there is
yeah.
no
Throttling.
active cooling on the MacBook Air. There is no fan on it. So when you push it too hard, exactly as you
Yeah,
said, what happens is it has to throttle down or it overheats.
yeah. It has no
So
choice.
it has no choice. So when it throttles down, you start to affect the quality of your live stream. And so the more you're doing with it, the greater the
Yeah,
chance that your hardware requirements are going to be higher. Now, as I said, I have successfully used it, and you can successfully do some of the gaming and stuff on a MacBook Air as well. But just know that certain things that you're trying to do, or if you try to push that hardware too hard, bring in too many cameras, for example, in Ecamm Live, or bring in too many guests, if you will,
mm.
that MacBook Air ain't going to like it. So, um, and it all comes down to that lack of active cooling. So, MacBook Pro, Mac Mini, Mac Studio, heck, even the iMac is a great choice and would be a great choice for crossover gaming as well. Okay, side note over. Um, let's talk about alternatives. We've kind of danced around this a little bit.
Yeah,
Obviously, for
yeah,
gaming, crossover is an excellent choice if you're looking for a little bit more of a seamless transition. If you used Whisky and you want to um, seamlessly move to something different, crossover is an excellent choice. It brings a number of advantages to the table that we've already mentioned, not the least of which is that it's more up to date, but it also offers support for things that Whisky doesn't, like automated installation routines, Wine 9, as I mentioned earlier, better
yeah,
support for installers from Epic Games and others, as
yeah.
well as something that you mentioned and I mentioned as well, that support and regular updates. That that and the code that they contribute back to the wine project is what you're paying for. If you want or need
That's right.
support,
Yeah, yeah,
you're not going to get support from
yeah.
Whiskey. You're just not going to get
For
it.
this to exist, wine has to exist as well because
Exactly.
crossover hangs off of wine. So if crossover can't contribute back to the wine project, then and if wine ever, God forbid, if wine ever goes away, then there will be nothing to hang from. Um, there would be no compatibility layer there at all. So um, it's good to support the developers because that does mean that we'll benefit down the road as developments go back to the wine project, and that improves and gets re-imported back into the crossover project. So as you say, they go back and forth, and it's a nice circular development.
So crossover is a great choice. If you're a heavy whiskey
It is.
user, definitely look at crossover. It'll be worth the investment. And again, it's not a subscription, and the renewals are much less than that initial purchase. So I think if it's something that you use heavily, it's going to be something that you're going to be glad
Yeah, just factor in the price. Yeah,
you
if you're a
invested
big Windows
in it.
gamer,
Yeah.
factor in the price of crossover. Yeah.
But what other choices might I have, Darren? What other route
Well,
can I go?
there are quite a few. As you mentioned earlier on, you can use Parallels VMware. They are virtualization hosts, so you're actually running another operating system inside your operating system to cover the running of said game, and they would also be running in a translation layer. So the Windows on ARM version, so the ARM version of Windows, shortened name is WOA, so WOA. So when
Whoa.
that WOA,
That's what people say when
so
they
yeah.
realize they're running Windows. They're like, whoa, whoa, what's this? Yeah.
Hold on there.
Ick.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so that's that whole operating system is running inside the operating system you're hosting it from.
Right.
So then that also has its own translation layer, which translates H6 code into ARM code for Windows on ARM to run on Mac ARM. So we're running through 3 translation layers there, and we're also running another big translation layer through running DirectX translation into Metal FX translations, or actually Metal. So there's so many translation layers going on there. You can successfully game in those environments, and it's quite good because you get very, very good compatibility, because effectively you are running it on Windows.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Although you don't get anywhere near as good performance because of all those layers in the way of running the code. There's much less layers going on, getting crossover to translate the code than there is to have to run it through all of those different layers to support Windows on your machine as well. And also you've got the added cost of having to buy a Windows license, or you may be able to work a little bit without a Windows license, but it's still not entirely good. I'm not sure if it's pre-licensed as part of Parallels, or
No, you
it
have to buy
could
it.
be. I don't think it.
You have to
Yeah,
buy
I
it.
think you have to buy a separate license and then license it afterwards. Yeah, so that's not entirely great, but there are several other ways and means as well. So one of them is I think will become more interesting in the coming years, which is cloud gaming. So
Mm.
this is where you're effectively renting a top-end gaming rig in the cloud, as essentially someone else's computer. So you're running the game on there, and it's streaming back to your Mac as if it's running locally. So it feels like it's running locally, and that can be quite good. But that relies on you having a very good internet connection. So if you do have a good internet connection, then you can not only successfully game in that way through cloud gaming, but it will also support, for instance, 120 or 144 hertz monitors, so you can run super high-end frames per second on that on any machine. So then in that case, if you did do cloud gaming, you could in fact have a MacBook Air that you game from, because it's not relying on the processing power of the machine in front of you that you're using. It's relying on the processing power of the machine you're renting in the cloud. And I know a lot of people would possibly bulk at it, because they'll look at the price of essentially you're subscribing to a computer in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
But if you add up the cost of building a gaming rig,
Mm.
buying all the drives, because the games are very, very big, so you have to buy big drives to store them all. You have to, if you had to build your own gaming setup, then that could be 3 years worth of rentals.
Yeah,
So,
they could.
looking at it that way, it could be advantageous to just say, well, let's just game in the cloud instead. Because one of the benefits is, as technology moves on, your cloud gaming rig that you're renting will also be upgraded and improved. So, so as new graphics cards come out, your new gaming rig in the cloud will adopt that new graphics card without you having to buy a new graphics card and keep on upgrading your own system. So it relies less on you having to host your own hardware and keep it up to date. And especially if you had a separate PC gaming rig, you'll probably fall off your chair if you saw the price of a graphics card for a PC nowadays. So those costs then sort of melt away and disappear into the cost of your rental of the cloud gaming system. So I think over time, over the next 10 years perhaps, well, say 5 to 10 years, that cloud gaming is going to become more and more an accepted thing for hardcore gamers to use, because currently they can be a little bit snobbish and they'll say, oh no, I'm never going to touch cloud gaming, that's not going to take over from my gaming rig, no, can't happen. But I'm sure it is actually going to come to pass. So that means it opens up the AAA gaming to every platform then. So any device you have, you can access that sort of gaming catalogue of games that you may be missing.
And just one note on that, you mentioned having a good internet connection.
Yes.
We're talking about not just downstream, but upstream as well. If
Yes. Oh,
if you
upstream
are
is important. Yeah.
if you're playing a game that depends very heavily upon your response time,
Yes.
you're going to need a nice fast upstream as well. So,
Yes.
your provider might say, "Well, you got 100 megabits per second connection, but your upstream connection might be 10. It might be 6. It
Yes.
all depends upon your provider. So ideally, you'd be looking at a nice fast, probably
Yeah.
50
Yeah. It's
megabits
not.
per second or higher for upstream.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily the amount of data you can shift. It's as you say, for reaction times and so on, because the amount the data is
Your
quite
ping
small.
times.
It's exactly, that's
Yeah,
much more important. So
yeah, that's
so
true.
yeah,
That's true.
that's the thing to go for. So you needn't have an exceptionally fast um, internet connection
Good
to
point.
successfully do this sort of gaming, but you do have to have one that is nice and snappy and reactive, um, or else you're going to miss that shot.
Yeah. Yep, you're right. You're right. Absolutely. It does depend more heavily on that reaction time. Yep, absolutely. Okay. What else? What other options are there?
Ah, um, oh yes, this is another very good option which we've touched on before, and that is the Mac Source Ports web page. And this is where people take the original. Well, they don't take anything actually. They're just providing a new game engine that is native to the Mac, all for free, of course. All of this stuff is free, which is good. But that then allows you to get your own original gaming files for your Windows version of the game and
Mm.
copy those into the Mac engine that has been created for you, so that you can play the full games. Um, and this is ideal if your game is on the magic list. And let me see how many there are. I've got the website up here. Hold on a second. It is, oh, there's not many. There's only 159 games so far.
Only
Um, oh,
159.
but you see, exactly, yeah. If several of the games that you really like are on that list, that's fabulous, because you can download the Mac native game engine, and just grab the files that you already have from your Windows version of the game and paste them into the right folders into your Mac engine, and play the game natively on the Mac. And all the big fun games are on there, especially the uh, all of the original Quake stuff and so on. So yeah, that's a good example. You can just download the Mac source ports Quake engines and grab your original Windows copies of your Quake games and just move the data into the Mac version and be playing it native.
Yeah.
And the frames per second that you get on that, because it's not going through any translation layers at all, it's fully native to the Mac. So you get an idea of what the speed of games can run at. They can run at literally hundreds of frames per second. It's quite astonishing. So if all the games you want to play are on that Mac source ports list, then that is fabulous. You can have great fun switching over to the Mac for gaming.
I love how these conversations highlights the difference in our ages, Darren, because you always go to Quake and my mind always goes to Doom. That's the
There we
difference.
go. Slight
That's the
difference. Yes, you're
difference
a
right
Doom
there.
guy and I'm a Quake guy. There we are.
Or heck, Castle Wolfenstein 3D even.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
In fact, they do. I think they do have a Wolfenstein on there as well. Actually, on
I
source
bet they
ports. I
do.
think there
I
is
bet
one
they
there.
do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. A little Duke Nukem too. Yeah,
That's it.
perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the other thing is there's quite a lot of indie games for the Mac, and you'll find a surprising number in the Mac version of Steam. So if you just pop on there, there are, and you just filter out. So you can say, show me all the games, and filter them by platform, and say filter everything out so that you only show the Mac games. And you'd be forgiven for thinking that there are only a handful, but when you look at it, there's well over 100 or 200 or so there. So if that can keep you entertained for a while, then you've got oodles of Mac native games sitting there on Steam ready for you to play, including loads of very, very good indie games.
And I'll mention two additional platforms to do that very same thing with. One is Epic Games, where they
Yes.
give away at least one free game every week, and oftentimes those free games are for the Mac. And then
Yeah.
GOG Galaxy, is that the full name? GOG Galaxy?
Yeah.
GOG? Uh, Good
Good
old
old
games.
games. Yeah.
Good old games. GOG. Good old games. Um, Again, both of those platforms, just like with Steam, you can narrow it down to just show the Mac games, and you're going to be astonished by how many
Yeah.
top tier games there are for the Mac, and
That's it. And
you
some
just
of
may
the
not
older ones
realize
are
it.
available for free now.
Yeah,
So I think I noticed the other day that there was the entire Monkey Island collection.
it is. Yeah, it's out
So
there now. Yeah,
that is out there and it's free. Just go and download it and enjoy it on the Mac as if it's well, it is a native copy. So yeah, people are supporting the Mac for gaming and especially putting out free stuff of commercial older games. So that's if that keeps you happy and you're not as much of a on the edge of your seat Windows gamer, then the Mac can be a very nice platform for gaming.
and even gaming aside, one other point to raise here is that if you're primarily interested in running productivity apps on the Mac, games, set aside, you've got an app for Windows that just never has had a decent equivalent for the Mac, or maybe the equivalents for the Mac don't work how you expect them to work. There will always remain the options of using virtualization or emulation on your Mac, as well
Yeah,
as sometimes Wine. And that's all become much easier now that Parallels offers built in emulation for the Intel platform. So even if you need an older version of Windows to run this ancient, creaky, old Windows app that you just can't live without, you could fire up Parallels and invoke the emulation feature to run
yeah,
x86 version of Windows on your Apple Silicon Mac, or you could use something like UTM, which offers very much the same
yeah.
feature of emulating x86 on Apple Silicon. And I will tell you, just from personal experience, the older the version of Windows you need, the better it's going to run under emulation.
Yes,
Um,
yes. If you've got
and
the particularly old pieces of software that they can struggle as well running on Windows itself.
Yeah.
So sometimes you get like an old app from the 90s that will struggle quite a lot trying to run on Windows 11. Some of them work, some of them
I
don't.
will. Yeah.
Mostly don't. In which case, you can grab your copy of Windows XP and put that inside UTM and run it on that platform, and the app will be very happy because it's running on the old operating system it's expecting to run on.
An even emulated x86 on an Apple Silicon Mac is going to run better than the original hardware it would have run on in the first place.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. You can get
Yep.
quite a good Windows XP machine running there, even
So,
though the whole thing is completely emulated.
yep. So one final question, Darren, and that is, what do you think this means for the crossover project? Is there anything about Whisky that makes it better than crossover that maybe code weavers might consider adding to crossover in the future? Other than adding
Well,
Isaac himself to the project.
well, that's it. I think Isaac's got a job lined up there with the crossover team.
He
If he
certainly should.
when he comes out of his studies, I'm sure he's going to do very well in his studies. Um, yeah, so not necessarily. You know, the big selling point of Whiskey, of course, was it behaved very similar to crossover, but without paying any money.
Hmm.
So it was the fact that it was free. So, but of course, there are things that uh, are interesting in crossover UI, for instance, and how it's handled and talks the user through things that maybe crossover could ingest. And that would be quite a nice contribution back from Whiskey into crossover, and make the circle is now complete.
The circle is now complete. Um, yeah, so it was just a really interesting story. And as I said at the beginning, uh, the thing that impressed me the most about this story is how well Isaac, the developer of Whiskey, handled the situation, uh, especially considering his age. This is not somebody who's,
Yeah.
been in business for 20, 30 years. This is somebody who developed this project out of a sheer passion for getting something like this done, for getting into the hands of everybody, for making sure that anyone who wants to run games on Windows can do it. And, frankly, as he said, it got to be too much. It was a heck of a lot of work.
Oh,
He wasn't getting
completely
paid.
understandable. Yeah.
And as he thought about it, he realized he really should be promoting people putting their efforts into supporting crossover or other similar projects that are contributing back to this underlying code that makes all of this
Mm,
possible on our Mac. So, very, very mature response, and super impressed by
yeah.
that. And that to me is, as I said, the story here. And
Yeah.
I really do wish him the best in the future. As you said, once he gets done with his studies, I think it said he was at Northeastern University. So once he's done with his studies, I have no doubt he's
No
got
doubt.
a super bright future ahead of him.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that wraps this up. If anyone has a favorite method for playing Windows games on the Mac that they want to share with others, drop me a line or leave a comment in the show notes for this episode to share your favorite methods of running Windows apps and games on the Mac, and we'll put it here on the show. Speaking of which, Darren, I do have a little addendum or errata, if you will, for episode 448. I actually misspoke on the app that I used to back up and transfer from Android. I had mentioned, what did I mention? Dr. Phone, right? Is that what I mentioned?
I
And
think it was.
the app that I meant to mention is Mobile Trans. That's one word, Mobile
uh,
Trans. Now, the interesting thing about that is Dr. Phone was really not wrong to mention because both Mobile Trans and Dr. Phone are from the same company, Wondershare, and both will transfer the data from one device to another. It's just that the app I actually used was Mobile Trans, and the reason I used it is because it's much more targeted in what it does, whereas Dr. Phone offers a much broader range of tools. So, if you are looking to transfer information from Android to iOS, and the app that Apple provides isn't doing the trick, which in my experience is often the case. Something like Mobile Trans may do the job for you.
Cool.
And then for last episode, Darren, you had talked about a shortcuts library that you wanted to mention, and we kind of forgot to mention
Yes.
it. What was that library?
Oh no, no, you put me on the spot
Oh,
there.
okay. Well, I didn't mean to. I thought maybe you'd remember. All right, I'll mention it for you.
Oh,
Um,
thank you, thank you.
I'll mention it for you
Dig me out of a
because
hole there.
the library that we meant to mention on that episode is from Matthew Casanelli. Matthew Casanelli.
I'm glad you said that.
And you'll find it at matthewcasanelli.com. Of course, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. There is a more direct link to the library. It's actually matthewcasanelli.com slash announcing the expanded shortcuts library. But I'll put a link to that in the show
Cool.
notes. That does bring us up to a comment left by Brian. He
Brian.
wrote in and said he was about halfway through episode 449's recording, and you and Darren were discussing sources to find published shortcuts. Rosemary Orchard was mentioned, but Darren had forgotten about another reference to get shortcuts. We just mentioned that a moment ago, Matthew Casanelli. But Brian wrote, was he thinking of Stephen Robles? Some of his
Ooh,
shortcuts are behind a paywall,
another great
but
source, fabulous source.
yep. But Brian said he has a lot. And Brian provided a link to Stephen's website and then also a link to Stephen's YouTube playlist where he demonstrates several of them. So thank you, Brian. That's perfect. We're going to put a link to both Matthew Casanelli's website and Stephen Robles' website in this episode's show notes. Darren, I believe you have an
Yes,
essential app that you would like to share this episode.
I do, and I'm makes a change that I'm actually all set up with it, ready to share. Yeah, I've just been discovering that because we were talking earlier on about, or in the last show, I think, about some very interesting settings. There was a setting I discovered which uh, allows us to bring back slow-mo mode, which
Mm,
we thought was gone forever, but is still there in your Mac. It just isn't turned on by default, so you can turn these things on. But that required a terminal command, and also because I really, really, really like column mode. One of the rare things you can actually turn on is to make each column the width of the content of what's in the column automatically. So as you click through the columns, they will change size to the width of what you're looking at, which makes column view even better. I love column view as it is anyway, but this makes column view even better. And again, that's one of these hidden um, uh, command line, command line. Oh, not a Windows show, are we? Back in the terminal. Um, but I found an even better way to try these things, which is less scary than the terminal could be. So this is my essential app this week is an app called TinkerTool.
mm.
So effectively, it's a tool that allows you to tinker. So, yeah, clues in the name there. So I've not done many of these features, but there's quite a few features that are hidden that it allows you to enable and expand upon, and two of which are my two favouritely newly discovered features, which are automatically adapt the file name widths in column mode, which makes column mode even better. It's fabulous. And also the other setting, which is a dock setting, which is enable the minimizer effect with slow motion when holding the shift key. So
Mm-hmm.
those two things can be turned on just by clicking a tick box and clicking Relaunch Finder and Relaunch the dock. So TinkerTool allows you to tinker with these hidden settings, which I'll be trying some of the other settings that it allows you to tinker with as well, where you can do some quite very interesting tinkering. But those two settings especially are the ones that I've really found to be fantastic, so that I'm actually actively using myself now. And now I've got a slow-mo mode, and I can click the minimize button with the shift key held down and get a lovely animated slow-mo display, like Steve Jobs demonstrated on stage to much applause back in the day.
Back in the day. And I was going to mention that. I'm glad you mentioned that just now because I wanted to explain what slow-mo mode was to people who might not remember. When OS 10 was initially debuted all those years ago, Steve Jobs wanted to show off what was actually happening behind the scenes. We could see, the Genie effect, and we could see how Finder windows were minimizing or other windows were minimizing down to the dock. But he really, really wanted us to see what was happening. The
Yeah,
effort that the operating systems developers put into assuring a nice, smooth, seamless transition from the
yeah,
active Windows state to the state in the dock. And so he showed it off in this slow motion fashion. And we learned that we could also mimic this slow mo way of minimizing apps to the dock by holding down the shift key. And if I'm being honest, I didn't realize slow mo mode had disappeared. I kind of just assumed it was there to this day. And yet it's been gone for quite a while now.
yeah.
And the secret is, as you pointed out, that it's really still there. They just, for whatever
It's
reason,
hiding.
decided to hide it, to disable the ability to activate it by holding down the shift key. And when you brought it up the other week, was a week or so ago, you brought it up, Darren,
That's it. Yeah,
and
yeah.
I would have sworn that the ability to re-enable it would have been within one of my favorite tinkering tools, which is Onyx, ONYX, by Titanium Software. And sure
Yeah.
enough, it was not in there. So it's really cool to see that TinkerTool has that feature. And again, you taught me something new because I didn't even know that there was a hidden feature to automatically resize the columns in column views. So that's two things I get
That's
to
right.
play with on my
Two
Mac
things.
with the use
Absolutely.
of TinkerTool. That's a great choice. And it's kind of a long URL. We're going to put this in the show notes, of course, as we always do with the essential apps. But it
Yeah.
is Bresync, Bresink, or maybe bresync.com/OSX or OS 10, but I can't say OS 10, it's OS X in the URL /tinkertool.html. And we'll put a direct link to TinkerTool in the show notes. As you said, Darren, it basically just opens up a whole world of new preference settings on your Mac that you didn't even
That's it.
know
They're all hidden.
existed.
All of these settings are hidden, and you can, if you can go a bit crazy there, and you can really change up the way the Mac looks and feels. So that's probably why some of these settings are naturally hidden, because Apple probably doesn't want the myriad of scary desktop setups that people could make by going through some of these options.
Apple doesn't like us to go too crazy with our
Not too
customizations.
crazy, no. You can customize to a certain point, but yeah, not to go too crazy, because yeah,
Now,
you don't
let's
default
mention
purple
this.
text on red. Yeah.
Let's mention this though, Darren. There is literally a version of TinkerTool for just about every edition. No, there
There
is
is.
a version of TinkerTool for every edition of Mac OS and OS 10 released since the OS 10 public beta. So
Yeah.
if you go, if you go to the TinkerTool website and you click to see the OS and license matrix, you can to this day download TinkerTool 1.1.2 Historic Edition if your current version of OS 10 is the public beta.
Is 10.0, or even before
It's
10.0. Yes, indeed.
before 10.0. And if
That's how. That's Yeah. That's how much of a pedigree this app has.
and if you are running Cheetah, you can get, which is 10.0, you can get 1.5.2. But yeah, there's a version of it for every single edition, up to and including Sequoia. So
Yeah. It's a
there you
very
go.
small app. It's under 4 megabytes actually. A very small app, and all it's
Yeah.
doing is it's allowing you to tick the boxes to turn on these hidden terminal commands.
Yep.
And there's a quite if you get stuck and you ruin the whole layout of your Mac and you want it back to the way it was, there's a reset menu at the bottom which lets you go back to the settings you had before you started playing with them. So that's a get out of jail card right at the bottom there.
And I will say that in that regard, TinkerTool is much more user friendly than Onyx is. Uh,
Indeed.
yeah. And,
Onyx can be a bit scary. You can break things, but Onyx is a fabulous tool which I also use myself, but mainly to clean up caches and do those sorts of things.
yeah. Yep. Yep. So that's it. TinkerTool. It's one word, TinkerTool, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Excellent pick,
Fabulous.
Darren. Excellent pick, especially for those of us who miss slow-mo mode. That's awesome.
Brings it all back again. Oh, and
And
you might end up falling in love with column mode now as well. You
I
never
I
know.
I will not. I will not. I guarantee I will not. But that's a conversation for another day.
Oh dear, oh dear. You might see the light eventually one day.
Yeah, no, I won't. And with that said, that's going to do it for this episode of For Mac Guys Only. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Remember, I do love to get your letters, so if you have any comments about the show, a tip to share, a software or hardware problem with your Mac, or maybe there are some tools that you would like to share for running Windows apps and games on your Mac, well, you can leave your favorites in the comments of this week's show notes found at formaccguysonly.com, or drop me a line, Mike at formaccguysonly.com. And do be sure to subscribe to the show's YouTube channel at youtube.com/FMEOTV and click that little notification bell so you can find out when we are going live. You can join the chat room and you can catch all the behind the scenes stuff that doesn't make the final cut of the show. Hey, Darren, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
Cool. Yeah, no worries. If folks want to have a chat with me, send me an email at darren@formacisonly.com.
Very cool. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks to Darren for joining me this episode. Stay subscribed, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye, everyone.
Cheerio.